Now, up next, we have Camila Hurtado to talk to us about the growth mindset alongside Diksha Hegde, who is a psychology student and a learning scientist. In her session, Camila will be talking us through how we can tap into our potential and use our strengths to fuel us further. And we can hardly wait to hear more. Over to you, Diksha.
Thanks, Sharanya. It's personally an honor for me to share this space with Camila because we share a passion for learning. We met at Allianz, where Camila works as an executive coach. Although currently she's on maternity leave and surrounded by her 4 children. I attended one of her workshops on the growth mindset, and that's what led me to invite her to this event. Camila is married to a Swiss-German citizen, and she currently lives in Munich, but she's lived across Europe in different cities. She's originally from Colombia and is a psychologist. She has experience in family therapy as well as in coaching for executives. And her focus is on positive psychology and enabling others to tap into their potential. So Camila, thank you so much for jumping in without any hesitation. It's been a pleasure to work with you and to see your conviction in this event. And I'm really looking forward to your workshop now.
Oh, thanks very much. Thanks very much, Diksha, for having invited me, for reconnecting with me after the event that we shared together. The topic of growth mindset is something I'm really passionate about, so it's really a pleasure to be sharing my thoughts with you. And I am really thrilled to see such a big community of people all over Europe connecting today. And before I share with you what growth mindset is about, I'd like to share a story. And this story happened about 15 years ago when I joined a consulting company in Switzerland as a consultant. And we used to do 2-day workshops on leadership development. I normally went along with a senior partner and they would develop or deliver most of the workshop. I was allowed to do like small bits of it, obviously in English. And but most of it, it was delivered and facilitated by the partner. And obviously all of it was facilitated by the partner when the workshop was in German. And I remember one day when I was preparing for one of these workshops with one of the senior partners, and he came to me and said, listen, something has come up and I won't be able to attend the workshop, so you're going to have to do it on your own. And I said, what do you mean on your own? And he said, yeah, well, you can take one of the junior associates with you, but I won't be there. So it was a bit scary, you know. I had done some facilitation before, in Spanish a lot of it, some of it in English anyways. So I got excited and I said, well, that sounds great. So I'm just gonna translate the slides from German to English. And then he said, oh no, you don't need to do that. What do you mean? Well, no, you're gonna deliver the workshop in German. Oh my God, and that was really, really a scary moment. Because I had been learning German for about a year and I was totally capable of having a fluent conversation with friends or with my husband about, you know, the weather and what I did last vacation, but never to run a 2-day workshop in German with a couple of Swiss leaders who were expecting obviously to engage in conversation about their leadership styles, their conflicts within their team, what was going on in the organization. So it was a very technical language that I needed to be fluent on. So I reflected and I told him, look, I'm honored, but I'm sorry. There's no way I can run a 2-day workshop in German. I think you're crazy. I just can't do it. And he replied to me very seriously and he said, you're right. I know you can't do it yet. And that got me thinking, I can't do it yet. But still I was trying to convince him, right? I'm like, yeah, what happens if I don't find the words in German, if I don't know how to say these things, if they ask me something and I don't know how to reply and, you know, I will fail. And he said, well, if you don't find the words, you just ask them. And I realized suddenly in his eyes, the only way to fail was not to dare. So I dared, right? He was giving me his trust and a safe space to do it. He trusted me, he believed in me, so I did it. And I went and I ran with a junior colleague of mine who was very supportive, very quiet, but very supportive, a successful 2-day workshop in German, almost all by myself. And that was an amazing experience because all of a sudden I was kicked out of my comfort zone. It was scary, but I realized that I was able to do something I never thought I was going to be able to do. I was diving in this new zone of learning, of discovering, of potential. And I was observing myself doing things that I had never dreamt possible. So at the time, I didn't have much of a growth mindset myself, but my boss did. And having him created this safe space for me was very helpful for me to start developing a growth mindset. So in this case, I was kicked out of my comfort zone, which made it a bit harder. But very often, as all of you are doing, we decide to leave our comfort zone to go and learn something. So you are all investing 3 days of your life to learn about yourself, to develop, to get inspired, to get better at your life. And that is great because you have the motivation to go for it. But very often, as I just shared with you, we really get kicked out of our comfort zone, as it happened, for example, with COVID-19, right? So we've been all kicked out of our comfort zone since about February, and we've been faced with challenging all of the things that we thought were possible in terms of the way we work, we relate with other people. This pandemic has brought with it a lot of uncertainty. For some of us, the opportunity to get together and closer to our family, but for some others, perhaps a lot of fear and a feeling of being overwhelmed, and maybe the opportunity to start something that you never thought you wanted to start, like cooking, right? So perhaps you always thought, I'm bad at cooking, but now I can't go out. There's no way to order something, so I might as well give it a try. And perhaps you realize you're not so bad at it. So very often we are faced with these situations where we have to leave our comfort zone and we don't really know how to navigate that. So what I'm going to offer to you today is a very powerful tool, if we want to call it like that, that will help you navigate that moment of uncertainty and of difficulty and become more resilient and be more successful. And that is the concept of growth mindset. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen now with you, and I'm going to tell you what we're going to learn. Okay, so bear with me for a moment. Alrighty. Okay, so what we're going to learn today is, first of all, the difference between fixed and growth mindset. Then I'll give you the chance to explore what your preferred mindset is and to reflect how having a fixed mindset might be getting in the way of your success. Obviously, after that reflection, we are going to explore how to develop a growth mindset to thrive and succeed. But before we go there, I'm very curious to hear from you. How come you are here today and these next 3 days, deciding to invest a lot of time and energy for yourself, for your learning? So I'd like to invite you to go to menti.com and use the code on the screen and just type in your word, the word that first comes to your mind when I ask you the question, what does learning mean to you? So what's going to happen? You've probably, alrighty. Okay, this always takes a little bit of time. Okay, so before I get into the discrete definitions of the mindsets, I'd like you to get pen and paper, and we're all together going to do a quick self-assessment. So I want you to read each statement and decide whether you mostly agree or disagree. Now look to see how many points each answer is worth and write down the number of points, not the answer, the number of points, because at the end you're going to have to add up your points. So I'm going to read 6 questions and I'd like you to write down your points so that you get a feeling of what your preferred mindset is. You ready? Alrighty, let's go. So the first question, you believe that how smart someone is or skilled in things like art, sports, or business comes naturally. 2, you believe that with effort, you could actually change how smart or creative you are. 3, while everyone is born with different strengths and weaknesses, you believe people can significantly change what kind of person they become. 4, you know that you can improve a little in areas you care about, but at the end of the day, you basically remain at the same level of intelligence and skill as what you started with. 5, you really believe that you can change parts of who you are. And 6, some people are funny, others are smart, some are good at sports, and others are natural creatives. People can't really change these natural born qualities. Okay, so that's it. Please add up your points and go to our next Menti question and share with us the number of points that you got after your assessment. By this time, you probably can guess what your points mean. But in case you don't, we're gonna share it with you in just a second. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that Diksha can show us how the results are going. Wow, excellent. Perfect. All right. So you have pretty high scores, which means that a lot of you actually believe that it is possible to change and develop new abilities and new skills. That it is possible to change the way. Wow, I'm very impressed. It's great that it is really possible to change and to become better at things and develop our intelligence. So it is not a static thing. Great. All right, well, as you can see, so I'm gonna just give it a couple of seconds more so we have, in case someone else wants to share. All right. Okay, thanks very much for sharing. So I'm gonna close this again. Thank you. And we're gonna go back to my screen. Okay, let me just, okay. So thanks very much for sharing, guys. What you will notice, if you haven't yet, is that the higher you scored, the more you tend to prefer a growth mindset. So what is this growth mindset about? First of all, before I go more into details about it, you need to know a mindset is a lens or a frame of mind which orients each one of us to a certain set of associations and expectations. So it is not good or bad. It is just the way we set our mind to interpret life and what happens to us, and what the way we see the world. In the case of the fixed and growth mindset, it is not that you are fixed mindset or growth mindset. We have both of them in a sort of a continuum, right? So for some things, we have more of one than of the other, or at some points or moments in our life, we tend to have more of a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. So let's explore that. Just keep in mind your results, and we will explore and become a bit more concrete about it. So what is the idea of growth mindset? The first person who came up with this idea is called Carol Dweck, and she wrote a book called Mindset. She's an American psychologist who's been researching this topic for a lot of years. What she discovered, or what she was curious about, was how come some people are more successful than others and perform better than others? Does that have anything to do with the mindset, with the way they see life? And she's done a lot of research on children and young people and the corporate world. And she's come up with this definition of two mindsets that define the way we see things: the growth mindset and the fixed mindset. So depending on the mindset that you have at a specific moment in time, you will have a different belief, for example. So if you have a growth mindset, you will believe that intelligence can be developed, whereas a fixed mindset believes that intelligence is innate and static. If you have a growth mindset, effort is part of what you need to become successful at a new activity, at a new skill. Whereas if you have a fixed mindset, it is more about looking smart and being smart. So putting a lot of effort into something might feel like not being smart enough. So you will avoid things that require from you a lot of effort. You will look for things that you're naturally good at. If you have a fixed mindset and you look for things that you're naturally good at, you will avoid challenges and risks and obstacles, because by doing these things that are not as simple for you, you might fail. And you don't want to do that because you might not look that smart. Whereas if you have a growth mindset, challenges and risks are what make you thrive, are what inspire you to grow, what make you curious, what make you experiment and learn and try things out. So you will see challenges as an adventure. You will look for them. What happens with failure? Well, if you have a growth mindset, failure is just a part of growing, right? It's a part of learning. It's a part of experimenting. So you see failure and making mistakes as totally natural, totally necessary part of growing. If you have a fixed mindset, however, failure means that you're not good enough. So you will avoid situations where you might fail. Where do you focus? So if you have a fixed mindset, you will focus on results, and you want the results to be perfect, because again, it is about being smart. It is about being better than others. So you're going to make sure that your end result is perfect. If you have a growth mindset, however, you will focus more on the process that will take you to the result and the progress that you make towards that result. So the end result is also important, but it's not your main focus. What you focus on is more the progress, the process that you define to get to the result, and the progress you make towards it. What happens with the success of others? Well, if you have a fixed mindset and one of your colleagues or your friends succeeds in something that you're working towards, how do you feel about it? Probably you feel jealous, probably you feel threatened by this person who's better than you. Whereas if you have a growth mindset and someone else succeeds, you might see them as an inspiration. You might look for them and try to learn from them. You might even ask them to be your mentor. Why? Because asking for help for someone who has a growth mindset is just acknowledging that you cannot know it all, that you need to recognize that some things you can do and some things you're in the process of learning. So asking for help is not a problem at all. Whereas if you have more of a fixed mindset, asking for help could mean that you are not good enough at something. So you will try not to ask for help and sort of hide the fact that you can't do it yourself, or you will try to know it all to get all the answers, to be as prepared as possible and avoid asking for help. The same, feedback. So if you have a fixed mindset, you don't want to necessarily be that open for feedback, because people might criticize you. And if they criticize you, it might mean that they're criticizing who you are. And since you believe that intelligence is set in stone, that's quite a hard thing to hear. Whereas if you have a growth mindset, feedback is an essential part of your development and of your growth. So you will seek out feedback. You will make sure that you ask people about how you perform, how they perceive you, and all of that you won't see as threatening, but as an encouragement for you to continue learning and continue trying new things. And this praising others is one of my favorites, because it is something that I can definitely relate to. So as you heard Diksha introducing me, I have 4 children, and that sort of obviously influences the way I see this idea of growth mindset. However, even if you don't have children yourself, we were all children once. So I'm sure you will connect with this. So what Carol Dweck did was to get a group of children, 5-year-olds, and give them a simple task. She asked them to draw a flower. Now, these 5-year-olds were very keen and happy to get this, part of this research. So they all drew their flower. And then they divided the group in two. One group got a fixed mindset kind of praise, and the other group got more of a growth mindset kind of praise. So how did that look like? So the first group, after finishing their flower heard things like, wow, you are really talented in art. It took you no time whatsoever to finish that flower and it looks perfect. Or, wow, you're really good at that. You didn't need to put a lot of effort and you look how amazing your work looks like. So perhaps you start hearing that that's a kind of praise that we've heard a lot in our lives, right? So a lot of our teachers and a lot of our managers still use this kind of praise. And I'll tell you in a minute what the problem might be. Now, the other group of children got praised with a growth mindset. So what they heard was more, I really like the amount of effort you've put into that flower. I can tell that you've worked really hard to get to that result. You seem to have chosen very carefully all the colors that you were going to use and, make sure that, that it made a beautiful picture in the end. So if you can hear the difference, it's all in the language that we use, right? These two groups of children got then another task, a more challenging task. They all got a more difficult puzzle that they had to solve. Now, what do you think happened with these two groups of children? Well, interestingly, the group of children who had received the fixed mindset praise were less keen on trying out the new puzzle. How come? Well, because when we praise their intelligence and their talent and how quick they were without any effort, and they see a harder task, then they're not sure they're going to be as talented and as smart to solve that second task. And therefore, they might need more time, more effort, and they won't get any praise. Because what I praised before was the perfect end result and how quick and how smart they were. Now, the children who got raised with a growth mindset were super keen to take the more challenging puzzle. They had been praised for their effort and their hard work, and a harder task only meant a new chance to work hard and to give it a go and to try it out. And whether they made it or not wasn't as relevant. So they were much more keen on trying it out. And this research has been tried in many other segments of people, and young students, and also people in corporations, leaders, managers, all around the world. And what Carol Dweck always encounters is, when you have a growth mindset, you are more curious, you are more able to deal with an uncertain situation, you are more willing to take on risks, to take on a challenge, to learn from it. You are more willing to accept failure as part of this growing process, and therefore you are more successful. You tend to perform better. I will share with you some resources at the end of the talk, so in case you get curious, you can explore a bit more. But before we go there, I'd like to ask if there are any questions, and I would be happy to answer the questions before we continue with some reflection. So if you have any questions, you can now submit them on ourmenti.com, or you can also type them in the comments on YouTube or Facebook. And I have my lovely colleagues who are hopefully collecting some of your questions, and they will send them or ask them out loud so that I can reply to them or answer them the best I can. If at some point later on you get a different question, or you didn't have the chance to ask it now, perhaps we'll have a chance at the end of the session. So I'm going to ask Diksha or our colleagues if there are any questions that are being posted now, I'll be happy to open a quick Q&A session, and otherwise we can leave it till the end. Diksha,
since you were talking about praise from family or giving praise to others, I think this question is fitting for this moment.
Okay.
Somebody's asking, sometimes we face a lot of peer pressure from our own family and friends that limits us in behaving in new ways because we're rewarded for behaving in a certain way. So how do we evolve beyond that and start new ways of being and doing?
Yeah, excellent question. Brilliant question. Well, I think that is, I don't know if necessarily that has to do with a growth mindset itself, but what I see is an opportunity for you to reflect on how you really want to behave, regardless of the expectations of others. So it might be hard to, at some point, say, sorry, this is not how I want to behave. This is not who I am. This is not what I stand for. I've realized these are not my values, right? And if you, like me, grew up in a very traditional family, then sometimes the expectations your family have on you are quite hard and quite high and quite different from what you want. So there, what you need is the courage to figure out what is it that you stand for and who you are and what you really care for. What are your values? What are the things that are really important to you? And if you happen to realize that these things are not necessarily the same as people are expecting from you, then to have this open and very candid conversation about it and to share with them, with the people that are important to you, how come you are not going to behave the way they expect you to behave. So in the end, it's a matter of standing up for yourself, of who you are, versus living up to someone else's expectations. And I know this is easier said than done. And you know, I'm talking to a younger population. This is probably the time in life when we get to decide really what we really want and not what our parents or our society wanted for us. And it might be difficult to sort of decouple from that. But I can only encourage you to, you know, having a growth mindset, to believe that you can behave in a way different from the one that people expect from you, if that is what you stand for, if that is what you believe.
Mm-hmm. There's a similar question on when we get in the way of ourselves, when we say that we want to grow and learn, but we somehow sabotage that process.
Yes, excellent question. Yes, I'm going to be with you on the Sunday, so we're going to have the opportunity to talk about that a bit more. I think we do that a lot, and the reason we do that is because the way we behave right now has proved to be successful to us. So even when we realize that we want to change our behavior is normally a habit. It has become a habit, and we've worked really hard to develop this habit. So now we behave in a way that looks normal, sort of autopilot for us. And to change that, we would need to go back and sort of deconstruct this habit and figure out how come this behavior has proved to be successful so far to me. And if it's not successful anymore, if it's not helpful anymore, if this behavior is limiting me now in my new situation, then perhaps it is a matter of acknowledging how come this has been useful so far and defining what do I need to change and how can I sort of replace this old habit for a new one to start whatever it is that I want to start doing. So we will get a bit more into the self-sabotaging by the end of the Sunday. But I think if you're already curious or noticing that you are doing that, again, it's going back to this growth mindset and saying, well, yes, I tend to do this. This is my way. This is what I do. This is what I can do best. This is fixed mindset. What is triggering this fixed mindset? What is stopping me from leaving this usual way of acting and going into the learning zone and exploring a different way of doing things? What is it that is triggering that attachment to the fixed mindset? And to deconstruct that a little bit and take a little step towards leaving your comfort zone. Perhaps not deep dive into it, but just try it for one day and see what happens, or try it for an hour, or try it for once in a conversation with one person and see what happens. Take small steps towards it. But again, we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of the session.
I think we'll just take one more, which is a very fundamental question, and it is it bad to have a fixed mindset, or is a fixed mindset bad?
I don't think it's bad to have a fixed mindset at all. I think it's very useful to have a fixed mindset in certain situations. So whenever you have discovered that you're really good at something and you want to excel in that, and you want to make sure that you perform the best you can, and beat the rest of your peers, that is a good mindset to have for a competition, to become even better, to thrive doing whatever you're good at. That is a good mindset to have. It can become problematic when having a fixed mindset gets in the way of you achieving something different. And that leads us perfectly to the next slide, which is a reflection that I want you to do. When is having a fixed mindset getting in the way of you achieving something that you really like? So perhaps, Diksha, we can continue to the next reflection question. What do you think?
Yes, I think that would be nice.
Yeah? Okay. So what I'd like you to do is to reflect. First of all, where do you already have a growth mindset? So as I said at the beginning, it is not that you either have one or the other, but we have both in certain situations. So perhaps you're someone who says, I'm terrible at sports, or I cannot cook, or, oh, music is not for me, I cannot sing. So that is where you have a fixed mindset. And you might have a growth mindset perhaps in what you're learning in university, or your job, or mindfulness, or meditation, whatever the topics are where you are more open and willing to experiment and explore. Those are the topics that you have a growth mindset. And then ask yourself, how is having a fixed mindset stopping you from achieving something you want? Where is this fixed mindset getting in the way of you daring to do something that you always wanted to do, but you don't know if you should, because you might not look that smart, because perhaps you're not good at it, perhaps you're gonna fail. How is that idea, that belief, stopping you from just trying it out, just giving it a go, and exploring a new universe of possibilities where you might encounter that you actually can develop all the abilities that you never thought were possible? So just take a little bit of time to write down your thoughts, and I will encourage you to do this all throughout these 3 days. Whenever you have an insight within one of these presentations, just write it down, because when we come to Sunday evening and I will invite you to create an action plan for yourself, it's going to be easier if you can look back into your notes and remember what this was about on Friday afternoon, because you're going to have a lot of insightful webinars and ideas and interactions, and it might be useful to have some notes to come back to. So if you realize that having a fixed mindset might be getting in the way for you to achieve something, it can be useful to start thinking, well, what do I do now, right? How can I develop a growth mindset? Or perhaps I see that my parents could need a little bit more of that, or my colleagues could need a little bit more of that. I seem to have pretty growth mindset, but some people around me are very fixed mindset. So how can I help myself or other people develop growth mindset? And what I want you to do is to share with us on this Padlet wall, and you can see the link there. I'd like you to share your thoughts on how to develop a growth mindset there, so you can always come back to this wall and have a look at what people are sharing and get some inspiration from each other. You know, use the collective intelligence of this group to go back to this wall and learn from each other. What can you do to get a growth mindset, to develop more of a growth mindset? Right. So knowing that you have plenty of ideas, I'm just going to give you some ideas on how to do this. again, to develop a growth mindset in yourself and in others. So the first thing that we do is what you're doing now, understanding that there is this idea of this fixed and growth mindset, and understanding that will already help you understand that you have a choice. And the same when you explain that to other people. So if you want to help others to develop a growth mindset, just explain the concept, right? It's a very simple concept. There's a lot of videos on YouTube or resources that you can have a look at, so you can share this idea or this concept with other people. That's the first step. The second step is to understand the power of language. So how we speak with ourselves, you know, this self-talk that we have with ourselves, all the inner dialogue, all the things that we say to ourselves is so impactful. Whatever you say to yourself, your brain believes and behaves accordingly. So if you want to act differently, you have to talk differently to yourself. And if you remember the story I shared with you at the very beginning, when I told my story, my boss, I'm very sorry, I cannot deliver a 2-day workshop in German. You're out of your mind. He said, you cannot do that yet. And just by adding that little word, it opens up a universe of possibilities. It invites me to explore, to become curious about what this yet means. What do I need to do to make it possible? So it's not, I can't cook. It's all of a sudden, I can't cook yet. Oh, okay, so what do I need to start cooking? Or I cannot make a presentation in front of the board members yet. Or I cannot set up my own business yet. So you can start feeling the power of this little word. The moment you say yet to something that you think so far that you cannot do, then a universe of possibility opens up for yourself. Obviously, for that to work out, you need to leave your comfort zone, because if you keep doing what you've been doing all your life and you're good at, you're not going to explore all the other possibilities. So leave to your comfort zone, dare to do that. And if you have the power or the possibility within your network, you lead a team of people, or you lead a project, or you work in a community or in a school, make sure that you create for others an opportunity to leave their comfort zone so that they can discover what their talents are and do a bit more of learning. Where do you focus on is very important, as we discussed when we talked about praise. Focus on the process and the progress and the effort that you make to get to the result. And that will already change a lot the way you approach a new task or a new goal or a new skill that you want to develop. And also very important is to shift from know it all to learn it all. So rather than wanting to have all the answers and know all the results and have solutions to all the problems yourself, shift to a learn it all, to a curiosity to ask for help and understand from other people, get inspiration from others, and be vulnerable and show yourself as a human being who cannot be perfect, who can know it all. So these are a couple of things that you can do within yourself. Now, when you are helping others to develop more of a growth mindset, praise the process and the progress rather than their intelligence or their talents, as we discussed before, and create for them a psychological safety for them to try things out, like my boss did with me, right? He said, I trust that you can do it, just go for it. What happens if I fail? You won't fail if you dare. If you try it, you won't fail. You tried. So the moment he said that to me, he empowered me and he created the environment for me to go and do it and give it a try, although I was scared, although it was difficult. So those are a couple of the things that you can do to develop more of a growth mindset. If you have questions regarding these topics, or if you have more ideas, please feel free to go back and pin them in the wall that we showed before. And obviously, if you are curious to explore more, there's going to be some resources available at the end. So as I said before, all your learning will be a good investment only if you move from knowing to doing, from understanding what growth mindset is, to doing more of a growth mindset. So how do we do that? How do you move from knowing to doing? And we will explore that, as I said before, on the Sunday evening. But I want you to reflect and write down your thoughts in terms of growth mindset. So the first question is, what is the one area or topic that you would benefit the most if you had a growth mindset? What's that area where you think, wow, here it would make such a difference if I had a growth mindset, if I were more open to try things out, if I were more resilient to be able to, bounce back from those difficult moments? Where would you benefit the most if you had more of a growth mindset? That's the first question. The second question is, how would you and others around you benefit from you having a growth mindset? So once you start developing more of a growth mindset, how is your life and how is your environment going to change? Your whole system is going to change. Either your family or your friends. The moment you start behaving differently and thinking differently, everyone around you is going to be impacted. How come? How is that going to be impacted? How are they going to be impacted? And how do you see that positive impact? Now, the third question refers to your progress, which is very important in the process. So how will you notice that you're moving from a fixed to a growth mindset? What are little milestones that you can define for yourself so that you can realize, yeah, it wasn't huge, but I dared a little bit. So that is progress, and you can celebrate that progress. The last question is, what are you going to do now? What is your first action step? So if you already discovered that you want to develop more of a growth mindset, you want a specific area of your life, how are you going to go about it? What is the first thing that you're going to do? Make it as concrete as possible. And if it's not concrete, just write down a word or two, make a picture, whatever is going to be helpful for you to come back to it by the end of Sunday and make an action item out of it. If you're curious to learn more, again here, I can recommend Carol Dweck's book and all of the talks where she is either a speaker herself or invited to have an interview with all kinds of people. It is a pleasure to watch her talking. She's very inspirational. And I especially like the one where she talks about the power of yet. So there's the link there. And if you want to get more concrete on ideas on how to develop a growth mindset, then there is also another link that I am sharing there with you. So Diksha, with this, I get to the end of the content. I am curious to see if there are any other questions that you would like me to get answered.
I think we're at the end of our time for this session. So if any questions remain, we can ask our participants to add them to the wall, and we'll probably incorporate that into the action plan session that you do on Sunday.
Perfect. And thank you very much, Diksha. If you want to explore more, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I will be happy to continue the conversation with you there.
That's a great offer. I hope people take advantage of that channel that you've opened up for them.
Yes,
thank you so much. Thank you so much, Camila. This was a wonderful, eye-opening session, and I hope that the concept itself strikes a chord with many of the participants tuning in. And now we will hand over to Sharanya to take us to the next session.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. That was such an interesting session. You really made us think about our own thinking patterns and how we can start evolving our mindset to strive for more. So yeah, that was wonderful. Thank you.